Hey everyone, today's video I'm going to show you how I record guitars using AMPS SIMS plugins. Now before we start, I record guitars normally through real amps and with a cab that's mic'd up. But since this one is, I'm going to show you how I do it with AMPS SIMS, I'm going to treat this as if I am recording with actual guitars. So in other words, I want to commit. So I'm going to record a DI track, and then I'm also going to record a printed track. So that this way, during the mix stage, I'm not going to go back and be able to try out different AMPS SIMS or anything like that. I want to be able to commit and move on. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create one mono instrument track, and I am going to call this one input. And this is all Pro Tools. I'm sure other DAWs you can do similar things, but I'm showing you how it's done in Pro Tools. Then I'm going to set up the routing. So the routing, since I am going into my interface on channel 1, I'm going to select my audience ID 44 channel 1. That is where my guitar input is coming in. In this case, just a simple DI, quote unquote DI signal. And then in a few minutes, I'm going to show you how I get levels for my DI. So I know that they're clean, but they're strong as well. They're not really like low or a weak signal. Okay, so follow me on my signal path here. So input is right here. That's where my guitar is connected to. Then my output, this one is going to be different based on what you do. But for me, my output here is going to be mix. Because what I do is all of my tracks go to a master mix bus, which is right here. All right. And then something I do, and this is totally on the side, this could be another video. I print my tracks, but because I'm doing this tutorial, I had to create 2 tracks here, which is my screen recording track and then my monitor on my headphones. So there won't be any latency. But don't worry about this. For you, it will either be your master bus, that will be your out. Your output will be your master bus or your 2 bus, whichever DAW you're using. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click input monitor so I can listen and hear a signal. So I'm just going to turn on my guitar and see if I can get a signal. All right, and you can see that the signal here is very weak. That's okay. So now I'm going to work on getting a good, healthy signal. So now I'm going to turn up my preamp, and I'm going to turn up my preamp until my Pro Tools meter starts to barely hit yellow or it kisses yellow. In the old analog world, on an analog console, the input channel, if it would hit red or at least it would touch red, that was okay. That means that it was starting to break up. The preamp was starting to break up, but not really. It still sounded musical, and it sounded good because it was analog. And in the digital world, the yellow is the new red. In other words, when you see meters in a digital console and it starts to hit yellow, that's good. You never want to see red. So what I do is I look at my meters, and when I start seeing a little bit of yellow, then I know that I'm getting a good signal. And I start to play as if I'm tracking so I can see the levels. And you can see that the yellow is a little bit hot, so I'm just going to pull back a little bit on my preamp. So that's a good starting point. I may adjust it later on, but for now it's good. All right, so now I'm going to bring in my AMPS SIMS, and I'm going to do it on the input channel. And I'm going to bring in now my AMPS SIM, and I'm going to use Newer Amp Modeler. But because Newer Amp Modeler is a VST plugin and Pro Tools doesn't recognize it, I'm going to have to use some sort of studio rack that can recognize VST. So I'm going to have to put that in first. So let me search for that. And I'm going to use Wave Studio Rack. There are others, but this is the one that I have, and it works for me. So you can try this one. You can try others, but this one works fine. Now I have my neural amp modeler, and I like to turn off the EQ. I like to turn off the gate because I really don't want anything affecting it. I just want the profile. So now I'm going to use a 5150 profile that I found online that I think is pretty good. And I'm just going to test it real quick. The signal sounds pretty good, so I'm going to stick with this for now, but I may adjust it as I do a first pass. So now, because I want to record as if I'm tracking real guitars, normally what I do is I set up 2 tracks. I set up my DI track and my amp track, or if I'm using a 57 mic to mic up the cab, that would be the other track. So I'm going to pretend that that's what I'm doing here. So I'm going to create now 2 tracks, and then I'm going to call this one left guitar DI, and I'm going to call it NAM because that's a neural amp modeler. And then I'm going to call the next one left guitar NAM. Okay, now let's look at the routing here. So the routing, I want the input to go into not the DI. The DI, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same input of my guitar where my guitar is plugged in. Because remember, this input right here, it's really a DI track with an AMPS plugin on it, but it's not committing to it because I can always delete this plugin and it just becomes a DI. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the same thing. So that takes care of the DI, but I'm going to mute it because I really don't want to hear the DI. The reason I'm using the DI is just basically for editing purposes. When I'm tracking guitars, I edit as I track, and you can see the transients on DI tracks. You can't see them on actual real guitars because, especially distorted guitars, because it's so compressed. So you really can't see the transients. That is why I use a DI. And I'm actually, before I move on, let me just group these 2. So I'm going to select them both. I'm going to group them, and I'm going to call this one left guitar NAM. Then I want the solo and record enable, because when I select record, I want both tracks to be armed. So now if I click on here, both of them are armed. Okay, let me take that out for now. So let's continue now with our routing. So we got the DI routed. Now we have to get this routed in. So where is the input coming from? The input of this one is going to come in from this input, but I'm going to create a send so I can send it to the NAM. So I'm going to now, since I have my sends over here, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go to a bus, and I'm going to choose a mono bus that's available. Let's do bus 21 here. Let's put this at 0. And then I'm going to name it. I always name my bus. And I'm going to name this guitar input. Now I'm going to go back here. And then now my left guitar, it's going to be the bus guitar input. So that means that the output of this guitar signal, it's going to go to my left guitar track. And then the output over here, I have to change these two to mix because, again, that's where I want it to go. I want it to go to the mix. So my bus, let me just click it to mix. For yours, again, it's different. Yours is going to be whatever your 2 bus is. So I think my routing is correct. So if I were to arm it and play a little bit, I'm going to see signal on all 3 of them. Let's see. You're going to notice that the signal for this one is hotter. So I can bring it down over here, but let's say that I can actually bring the input of this, but it's really an out. But if I bring this down, let's say I bring it down to -3. You can see -3 right there. And now I'm going to play. Let's see what happens. That looks good. I'd rather do that. It looks like I'm ready to track. All right, so I'm going to give this a try. It's not going to be perfect. I'm just going to do one pass. Normally, I would edit it, play it over until we get it perfect if I'm really actually tracking. But I'm the one actually playing here. I don't have the guitar player here. So I got my click on going on here. I got it set at 2 measures before, or an 8 count. I want to have an 8 count. And then I'm going to record just this bridge section of this song. So as you can see, okay, that's pretty healthy. That's basically when I'm recording electric guitars or I'm recording really heavy distorted guitars, I also visually look at it so I can get an idea. And that's basically what I like to see. Now, what I'm going to do is I want to track this again because I track left and right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these 2 tracks. I'm going to right click. I'm going to duplicate these 2 tracks. So I'm going to get rid of all the data. I don't need anything here. I'm going to click OK. But you're going to notice that the routing is the same, and that's what I want. I want the routing the same. Let me just group these real quick. So I'm going to call this one right guitar NAM. And everything should stay the same. So I'm going to click OK. And now I'm just going to rename this since I'm doing right guitar. So I'm going to do right guitar DI NAM. Right guitar NAM. And then I can enable these and I should get signal. Awesome. So now let's record the right side. All right, so now I'm just going to end with, since everything is, I showed you how to track, I'm just going to do a quick cleanup here. I'm just going to get rid of this. And then over here, this part, it's off, so don't need that. And I'm probably going to do a little fade there. A little fade there. And this is usually what I do when I'm tracking. I want to capture the pick attack here. Okay. So now I have my left and my right. So I'm going to pan to the left, pan to the right. My DI is muted. So now if I hit play, I should get a decent mix. Let's see. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video. And until next time, happy recording and happy mixing.